It's Wizard of Oz with shock therapy and headless witches. For the month of October, we're looking at 5 horror and Halloween classics to determine if they are required viewing. We begin this week by taking Return to Oz, the 1985 Disney follow-up to the 1939 MGM musical classic. Return to Oz finds Dorothy about to undergo electric shock therapy to rid her of her perceived delusions of the mystical world of Oz. Saved by a ghostly figure, she finds herself back on a broken yellow brick road as she discovers her friends have been turned to stone by the evil Gnome King and a devilish headless witch. Pursued by a gang of wheelers, she meets new companions as she endeavors to save Oz and the fantasies within her own mind. When Disney goes over the rainbow, one would expect happy-go-lucky munchkins, dazzling colors, and memorable songs to compete with the original beloved classic. Instead, what we got with Mickey Mouse's Return to Oz were half men, half hospital gurney abominations, homicidal headless witches, and little girl shock therapy.
Not to mention cross-dressing stone wizards with slippers.
Yes, Kyle. This yellow brick road is all sorts of
fireball.
Oh.
Which is probably why it's so very well remembered. Disney's Return to Oz is really, it's really, you look at it and the only thing you can think of is 1980s.
I think people who hate eggs, the fuck is wrong with you people?
Honestly, I don't know what these films are trying to do to little kids. The first film showed that water can kill you. This film shows that eggs can kill you. If they did another one, it'd probably be like toast. Toast would kill you.
Boy, did they do the original characters dirty in this movie, though, didn't they? Like, they're in it for 30 seconds practically as a trio, and like,
they look awful.
A, they look awful. Thank you for beating me there. And B, like, only one of them even friggin' talks. Like, I get there might have been a lower budget on this movie, and you spend it all on your cross-dressing stone Gnome King wizard thing, whatever. Yeah, that they did them pretty dirty on that one, Demos, got to tell you.
You think that with the Scarecrow is the only one that actually had, out of the original 3, that actually had a somewhat expanded cameo, because cameo is the only word I can think of that's appropriate to this. Even his facial articulation was terrible. They had to replace his face for every single different expression, and it wouldn't be so bad if you didn't have 2 much greater accomplishments to compare it to. The other characters in this film, Jack Pumpkinhead is amazing to see visually speaking. And then you have this, and compare it, of course, to Ray Bolger's performance. I mean, this came out 50 years after the original. Now, there isn't a direct connection. This isn't the official sequel to The Wizard of Oz. But there are definitely enough callbacks to strain a connection, right down to the ruby slippers, which they had to spend an inordinate amount of money to MGM to be able to use those, because in the original book they were silver.
Is that the reason why we couldn't get speaking characters? They killed their budget on the cross-dressing ruby slippers? I thought I was just joking at first.
Those cross-dressing ruby slippers were expensive as they were. They really they defined the term bling.
That's a fair point. And by the way, side note, all the trash we're going to talk on characters, I know he's not perfect, but TikTok is my dude, all right? Me and TikTok are like this, son, okay? He's awesome. I don't know why I like him so much. There's no good reason for me to like him so much, but I like him.
Possibly because he's the only character in this that feels like you could have picked him up and dropped him in the original classic, and he would have fit right in.
Legitimate. I mean, there's a reason why he defended Oz and in a losing battle in the movie. That's pretty much what happened with his portrayal in this movie. Or maybe I just like the fact that he beat the shit out of the Wheelers. That goes a long way for me too.
With a lunch pail.
with a damn lunch pail. By the way, side note, speaking of other things in this movie that were bad, I'm not saying the Wheelers were bad per se. They scared the hell out of me in the day, and I get how they get less scary, but when they're first on the scene and like they're bending their heads forward for the ugly mask to show off, I got to be honest, like this movie, like every episode of Briscoe County Jr. needs more Comet. This show needed more Toto. Instead, we got this chicken, okay? I'm just saying.
I'm sorry, every time you mentioned chicken, for the rest of this episode, my thought goes immediately to probably one of the funniest lines in this film, in which the Rock character is reporting to the Gnome King, and he's like, "She has a chicken with her," and the reaction, "A chicken!"
She has a chicken with her.
It's almost like, I mean, you can't because it's a Disney movie and get your edits ready, but like it's almost like you hear the cross-chesting Ruby Slipper guy go, "What the you know?
A chicken!" Which was actually pretty much my reaction when I saw that a chicken replaced Toto. I was really...
I mean, hey, maybe they should have been scared to do something because a chicken was a bad idea.
There are a couple of pretty fun lines in this. There are a couple of really good exchanges, and one of my favorites is with Jack Pumpkinhead when they're talking about TikTok. And one of the interesting aspects about the TikTok character is that he requires different cranks to get different parts of him to actually work. You have to crank his brain, you have to crank his mouth so he can speak, and you crank his body, which sounds a lot worse when you say it out literally. But nevertheless, there's an exchange where Jack Pumpkinhead says to Dorothy,
If his brains ran down, how could he talk?
It happens to people all the time, Jack.
I love that.
Correct.
I love that.
There's a reason why Jack sees enough wisdom to call Dorothy mom. I'm just saying.
I think that's quite appropriate because an argument can be made that Dorothy invented all of them and therefore she is mother to them all. And Ozma of Oz, who eventually becomes queen herself, is a reflection of Dorothy. And therefore, she is the legitimate mother to Jack Pumpkinhead. I know, I'm going deep in Return to Oz. Hey, any film that has that features a yellow brick road has to be layered.
Fair. I'm also, listen, any movie that turns a snake oil salesman, electric therapy doctor into a cross-dressing Gnome King with ruby slippers, how am I going to criticize your thought process in depth? I'm just...
Well, let's back up because we started the episode talking a little bit about kind of some aspects of the film that are considered horror aspects. I honestly fully believe that this is a contender for a Disney horror film in the same way that, well, Watching the Woods which we covered last year, was a straight up honest Disney horror film. Whether you found it horrific yourself is up to debate, but it was a horror film. This film, I think, is...
The acting in that movie scared the shit out of me, so there you go.
Lynn Holly Johnson, I mean, she scared Roger Moore. He had to beat her off with an ice cream cone. But nevertheless, For Your Eyes Only, James Bond. But nevertheless, this film is scarier than The Watch in the Woods. I'm sorry, this film is terrifying. And oddly enough, everybody always talks about the Wheelers. You just talked about the Wheelers. And you mentioned the one scene that they are legitimately scary when they have those silver masks on. I'm sorry, the moment they take off those masks, they are no longer frightening to me in the least bit. As a child, they were no longer frightening. For me, some other aspects of the film were far, far more terrifying. The headless witch and the hall of decapitated heads that Dorothy has to sneak into, and then they all start shrieking, high pitch at the same time, while this headless body chases her down. I mean, there are legitimate like adult horror films in the 80s that didn't have a scene as terrifying as that. I'm sorry, that is the stuff of nightmare imagination.
So here's where I'll weigh in on that. Head number 31, legitimate terror. By the way, also the actress that played Bob Morta in Willow, so she's got a little cred in my mind. We should do Willow at some point as probably one of the most underappreciated fantasy movies of the 80s, if not of all time. Okay. Hashtag I said it. That being said, other than Head 31, the rest of it to me was comedic there. Like the body running around by itself without a head just looked damn stupid to me. Yeah, I mean, at least at the end of the day, if the wheelers eventually caught up to you using wheels, they could beat you with those wheels that looked like they would kind of hurt a little bit. This body running around without a head just looks stupid to me. And Princess, whatever, but I don't really know why she's there other than to create a tense situation to force the usage of the powder of life.
Yeah, in the whole scale of things, Princess Mombi, which is her name, she's no wicked witch. And I think that they had that character in there kind of to fill in that gap of missing a witch. The Gnome King is the real big bad in this, and of course his parallel, water being the thing that kills the witch. This time it's an egg that kills the Gnome King. Breakfast items apparently kill these creatures. I think that without the sound effect of all the heads screaming and it cutting to like the facial expressions they have elevates the headless body chasing after her. If it was just that and it just relied on the film's score, which I think is very poor.
Yeah.
On its own, it's very poor. Okay, just what
we're even comparing it to, like, how unfair is that?
You can't compare it to the original Wizard of Oz. There's no comparison. I mean, it is kind of strange that as a Disney follow-up to a film that in many ways is the most Disney film ever made that's not a Disney film, and you go for dark horror. And I appreciate that. I appreciate the fact that they actually took a risk. They did take it to some very interesting places. Some of the other horror scenes I'm thinking about, and this is even before they get to Oz, but did you get the impression that at the beginning of the film, when they're running around the mental hospital, did you get some kind of Silent Hill kind of vibe out of it?
What's that screaming?
Their patients have been damaged, locked in the cellar. Quick!
Yeah, I can see where you get that from. I have not played the Silent Hill series profusely, but I have seen enough and I've watched other people play it enough to know of that eerie, gosh, is there anything even in front of me kind of feeling, and will it try to stab me in the face or try to shock me with the electrocution? But I mean, since we're mentioning the mental hospital, I find it very interesting that all the parallels, like where the original Wizard of Oz movie that we know and love paralleled the characters off of people who were on the farm avoiding a catastrophic event. This movie then went dark and chose to evolve items and or characters from a horrific place for the horrific events into what took place in Oz. Like, seriously, TikTok being the parallel for the damn electric therapy machine kind of blows my mind a little bit. I didn't catch what they were doing when I saw it as a kid, where the doctor there is actually literally walking through making a person out of the electrotherapy machine and basically forming it into TikTok.
Even the Wheelers, you see them. They're the ones with the hospital gurney, and that's another scene that's actually kind of horrific in its own way. You have Dorothy waiting alone in this room, and you just hear this squeaking approaching the door. It's fantastic setup overall. Yeah. This is the only thing I'm going to say that this film does better than the original. I liked the... and it's a nitpick of the original.
Sure.
This is not a big deal, but I like that this one kept it more ambiguous than the original Oz film, where they delineated specifically, yes, it was a dream. By God, if Oz wasn't a dream in this, then you have the professor dies in a fire, and you have a little blonde girl that supposedly drowns. This commits to its darkness.
It's a happy song. No, yeah, exactly.
And they mention her, like, they legitimately say there's this other girl. It wasn't her imagination. There was another girl that just disappears under the water. You never see her again, except in Oz.
Now, yeah, I'm with you there. And let me add this. You hinted at whether or not it's a horror film. I'm not prepared to say that, but it's definitely a Halloween film. Mm-hmm. I mean, even in there, she even says "Happy Halloween" with the jack-o'-lantern and all that. The movie literally has a talking jack-o'-lantern, and we've been over the Gnome King and his alternative life choices with ruby slippers. I mean, the dude's wearing a costume.
And eggs are deadly, and what do mischievous kids do to houses on Halloween? They throw eggs.
Ooh. I like that.
Screw Gandhi. This is a deep layered film from the 1980s.
Wow.
Let's take a look at Dorothy. Now, in this particular case, she is more age appropriate to the character from the novels. Although, oddly enough, where Judy Garland, who was 16, 17 when she did the original, was acting like a little kid, I got the impression that this Dorothy, she's seen some. The first time you see her in the film, and she's pale, and she's just staring blank-eyed in a dark room out the window. The little first impression I have of this character is, that's a creepy girl.
Like, this chick had to deal with being separated from her family in a faraway land, having to survive trees throwing apples at her and stuff, having to survive fighting friggin' flying monkeys. I mean, like, and then on top of that, having to kill a witch, a wicked witch of the West specifically, and doing so with water and like watching this humanoid drown into a pile of like, listen, man, there's a reason why she has shock and why she can't sleep. She watched a human being melt. Have you seen Breaking Bad? It's gross.
So you're saying that she's suffering from post-traumatic Oz disorder?
Goddamn right. She is suffering from PTOD.
Patad. She's suffering from Patad.
That's right, bitches. I like how some of the little nuances from the Dorothy that we saw in Oz was there. Like the little, how'd you do? Curtsy.
Yeah.
Was it? And that was cute. And like there was certain way she said certain words. You knew that actress at the very least had seen the material, right? Listen, it wasn't going to be Julie Garland. I get it. But as a child who is age appropriate to play that role can do, I feel like she did.
Jack Pumpkinhead, I have to say, there's no way in hell that this character wasn't the inspiration for Jack Skellington in The Nightmare Before Christmas.
Right. Jack Skellington is definitely the evolution of Pumpkinhead.
He even appears. The first time you see Jack Skellington in Nightmare Before Christmas, he has a jack-o'-lantern on his head. He looks practically identical, except he's much smarter and he has that awesome singing voice.
And he's curious about Christmas. Like, honestly, I'm glad you brought up Jack Skellington, Demos, because a thought I had that I want to mention on the show tonight was that this is what happens if Jack Skellington, instead of being curious about Christmas, was like, The Wizard of Oz is this movie? We should do a production.
The only other main character, I mean, this film has a new trio in lieu of the original. So you got TikTok, you have Jack Pumpkinhead, who honestly he looks really cool, but that's about where my love for the character. As a kid, he was my favorite because he just looked really cool, and the effects on him are very impressive. But as a character, he's kind of one note. Gump, it's kind of a cool idea, but at the end of the day, he's nothing really more than aerial bovine transportation.
Aerial bovine Frankenstein. Doodah.
What else can I say? His name is Gump, and he has pretty much the same mental capacity. He pretty much has the same mental capacity as Forrest, so it works out.
I don't know much, Dorothy, but I do know what color green is. I am a fan of Gump, but it has nothing to do with a wooden moose. No, I mean, other than TikTok, I could give a damn. That's where I'm at, you know?
I actually thought that the special effects with the Gnome King were particularly interesting. I liked the big challenge he sets up to try to find the lost characters and what ornaments that they've turned into. I like that challenge. I like the duplicity of that challenge. You could pretty much figure it out real fast, but I kind of liked the mystery of it. But I think what I found far more intriguing was his evolution from becoming a gnome rock monster to becoming more human-like with every character that falls prey to this challenge. I found that to be particularly interesting. I liked that it with limitations, obviously, but I liked that it felt seamless.
I'm with you. It looks very whose movements, even though he's solid rock still at that point, are seamless. That's a good word for it.
I'll be honest. When I was a kid and I first saw that, I instantly noticed that he was suddenly a human actor playing him, and I came up with a theory that Their stop motion budget must have run out. So they had to scramble quickly.
I mean, listen, there are crazier stories than that. Like when I first heard about Monty Python and the Holy Grail doing what they did because they couldn't afford horses, anything's possible.
But what a brilliant way to solve that problem.
Right.
I have this really weird, dark theory about Return to Oz, that the electric shock therapy actually happens. The moment they flip the switch and it goes white in tune with the lightning strike, I think that the rest of the film is pretty much her memory of Oz being sucked out, which is one of the reasons the Yellow Brick Road starts falling apart, Oz starts falling apart, and everything. But the trick is that it wasn't successful, because at the end, when she sees Ghost Girl in the mirror telling her to be quiet and not tell anybody about Oz, I think this film is much, much darker.
Well, you say that. I would also endure that represents the success of the treatment.
Mm-hmm. Oh, in a way, she can actually now live a normal life. She just doesn't tell people about Oz.
Bingo.
So this doctor gave his life to save the sanity of this little girl. The Gnome King is a hero.
Well, actually, the doctor gave his life, so to speak, but so too did other patients and him coming up with this treatment. Basically, what I'm trying to tell you is that the doctor was the head of a concentration camp.
Oh God, what?
Man, I'll tell you, this, like I said, this movie is oddly worse and better than I thought it was all at the same time. You could tell the budget was missing for it. I feel like it was somebody's pet project and they convinced somebody to do it. The problem with it is the first one was so good. You know, how do you follow that up? And like what I like in it too is I'm not a horrible singer, right? Like, you know, I've sing-songed many things on this show, and, you know, not just, you know, other actual bits of singing, and you know, I'll karaoke on occasion rather. But this movie, I am returned to Oz if like Freddie Mercury went up on stage before me. How the do you follow that? And I hope you used uh-oh for that one, because how the uh-oh would be appropriate as heck.
Well, I think that was the challenge. I mean, oddly enough, the history of how this movie came about dates all the way back to Walt Disney. In the 1950s, he was going to actually make a film called The Rainbow Road to Oz, and he bought the rest of the Oz books just so he can do it. The project actually went so far that on an episode of Disneyland, they actually got the Mouseketeers, who were going to star in the movie, to actually put on production numbers of this film. And then it just disappeared without a trace. It got canceled. Nobody ever spoke of it again. But Disney retained the rights to the books. And they were about to lose them, which is one of the reasons they pushed this project forward. Now, why didn't Walt do it?
What about money?
My guess is, at the time, Wizard of Oz was regaining incredible popularity because of its airings on television and so forth. And at that particular point, I don't think Disney wanted to compete with that. Instead, he ended up making Babes in Toyland, which isn't one of the most fondly remembered Disney fairy tale musicals, but eventually led to this. I think that I understood why they did it the way they did it. If you're going to follow up the original and you do anything that replicates its style, people are immediately going to compare it to. So they went in the wildly different direction. And there's a lot of stuff in this film that does work. There are a lot of good ideas in it. But I think the biggest problem is the execution. I mean, take a look at its cinematography. I think one of the things that cemented Wizard of Oz as a classic is that change from sepia to color, and this film tries to replicate it but it's very subtle. It tries to replicate it in that the color palette of Kansas is very, very muted, practically black and white. And when they get to Oz, it's slightly brighter. Slightly. The entire film, for the most part, has very, very muted color palette, and I think it takes away a little bit from the magic. And I can say, okay, it's a darker film and so forth. Yes. But the muted color palette fails to distinguish the darker moments from the lighter moments. It all just feels crushed by this melancholy almost.
You're not going to be able to replicate, I don't think we're in Kansas, Toto. You know.
Well, if Kansas has those kind of mental facilities and she's like, fake fire! I'm not in Kansas anymore. Look, lollipops. Munchkins with lollipops. How can you argue with that?
Somebody should come up with a guild to look after these things.
Let's get to the big question. Return to Oz is a required viewing.
Hell no. God. Listen, it would be nice to see in a museum, but it doesn't even necessarily belong there. I'm not even prepared to give this strong enough to recommend it. I mean, it's adorable, it's cute, and it's novel. But other than TikTok, for my money, there's nothing that's forever enduring. If you really want to see a good performance from Bavmorda, you watch Willow.
Mm.
And I kind of feel like at first when I see the chick that plays Dorothy in this movie that like she grows up to star in The Craft and then also is Bobby Boucher's girlfriend in The Waterboy, but that's not the same actress. Those eyes are the same. I can't get that out of my head.
They're piercing. They're piercing, which is why her first scene looks kind of creepy. She looks like she walked out of a Tim Burton film. She looks like a young Helena Bonham Carter from Sweeney Todd.
Well, and let's be clear, much like that character you cite, Dorothy too has seen some. We've established this.
Is Return to Oz required viewing? No, it's not required viewing. I think overall it lacks the life and wonder that ingratiated the original to millions. While the 1939 film certainly had its fair share of dark moments, I think it was balanced by the marvel and fun of its journey. Here, those dark tones override the film. It masks its characters in an oil slick that only lights up intermittently.
Ooh, that's a fine analysis.
So there's some great ideas here. I like a lot of the character designs. TikTok, Jack Pumpkinhead, even the idea of Gump, I think is incredible. And I think it's the bizarre nature of this piece that makes it a fascinating curiosity piece. But that's as far as I'm gonna say it is. I think it's a curiosity piece. I think it's a fun Halloween era movie. It's a good light horror film. I still think it veers into horror. It's a family horror film, which I know sounds like an oxymoron, but they exist. It's a fun Halloween movie, but overall, I wouldn't say it's strong enough to be a recommended film. Next week, we're going to start our coverage of the Evil Dead trilogy starring Bruce Campbell and directed by Sam Raimi with the original 1981 Evil Dead. Kyle has never seen any of these films, even though he's a big Bruce Campbell fan, so I'm really excited to hear what he thinks of it and how the experience will traumatize him.
Bring your chainsaw, bitches!
Groovy.